Have you ever wondered if it's safe to travel the country with a travel trailer, especially if you're by yourself? Hi, I'm Jen Grover, and this is Rocky. Today I have 12 tips for you to help you keep safe while you travel. If you want to know which one is my favorite of the strategies, stay tuned until the end of the video. If you like the content I'm producing, please subscribe, hit the like button, and also leave a comment below. Stay tuned for this week's episode of Tab Talk. Amanda, I hear a lot of people asking about whether they feel safe, whether you feel safe. Is it safe for a woman to travel alone? Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with traveling alone and safety and sort of what your mindset is, what strategies you use to keep yourself safe while you're on the go?
I think that probably that's the question I get asked the most. I imagine you do as well, is about safety, especially for people who have not done a lot of traveling by themselves. Either they were married or they just have never done it, eating out, all these things about traveling alone. But I get more questions about safety than anything else. And I think it's a good question and something that we need to pay attention to. I've been traveling solo for probably 16 years, I want to say, and all over the world. So I travel Caribbean by myself. I've traveled Europe by myself. One of the things that I would say is that travel is relatively safe. You're probably more likely to be mugged at your local mall than you are on a lot of the places that I go. Having said that, most crimes are about opportunity. And so what you want to do is reduce opportunity as much as possible, which means that you're always aware of your surroundings. You're always paying attention if you're walking somewhere, and you don't be flashy. Like, my little camper is so stinking adorable. Your camper is adorable, but I don't glamp it up when I'm out in the middle of nowhere by myself. I don't advertise that I'm a woman by myself. I don't. Some women will like put two chairs out, or they'll put some man's boots out. I've never done any of that. And if that's something that people feel comfortable and safe doing because it makes them feel safer, that's perfectly fine. If they want to prepare and act like there's someone with them, it's whatever they need to do, as long as they go. You don't stay home, to do those things. I've never done those things. I have, however, always been really aware. I do walk with an attitude if I'm walking somewhere, and I mean with an attitude where it's like, bring it. If you're gonna, bring it. Don't you mess with me. And fake it till you make it. If that's not your personality, then fake it till you make it. Don't be real obvious that you're lost. Don't be real obvious that you're confused. In the camper, I probably feel more safe than I did before I had the camper, because I was a tent camper.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I had only canvas. That was my only protection. Where in the tab, I actually have a locked door and really solid windows. And they're at a height where someone can't just hop in. You'd have to really be making a lot of racket to get into one of these campers. They're really secure. So I don't have those kinds of fears. And I have had really good experiences we're talking lots of miles and lots of places, Canada, all of the United States. I've never had an issue where that would stop me from camping again. I've had some issues that made me more aware of being aware, but I've never had an issue of that. Having said that, I think that we both probably have some strategies on, if something did happen, what would we do? And that should be a rehearsal that everybody should be having in their minds. So what do you do when you're alone? What kind of mental rehearsal? If this happens, I would do X. What do you do?
To start with, I do a lot of overnight stops at Walmart, Cracker Barrel, other places. I will preview those locations and their neighborhoods on Google Maps with the satellite and street view.
Good idea.
I want to make sure I know what it looks like. It looks like a safe area. I'll even read reviews about the stores to see what people who visit there say about it, because that can often be a key indicator that it may or may not be a good place to stop. So that's one thing I do. I do some preventative screening, so to speak. And I keep my keys handy, because your panic alarm on your car is a great way to scare off people. I
Very
do
good
have
idea.
bear spray. I think we've talked, I would hate to try to shoot bear spray off in my tab because I have been sprayed in the face with bear spray. It's not
Oh,
something you want to do. And bear spray
no,
is more than sufficient to disable somebody who would be an attacker. But if
it
you
is.
keep them coming and they won't back off, you can step outside and spray them and have that
Yes.
protection. Another thing I do for the peace of mind of my family, when I'm boondocking, especially where I may not have good cell service, I have used both a Spot device and an InReach Explorer, which is made by Garmin. It's a satellite tracker. And so my family has the ability to real time know where I am and I'm able to communicate. Now, that's for people who go off grid away from cell service. You don't need that if you're going to a state park. But if
Right.
you spend time remotely, my family really appreciates having that capability of always knowing where I am and that I'm safe and that I
Hmm.
can communicate with them. It also is great if I break down. Like I go into a lot of off-road driving for
Hmm.
photography with my Jeep.
Hmm.
And so if unfortunately something were to happen, I'd have a way out. If you
Good
can't
point.
self-rescue, you've got to have a way to get help. I think being able to self-rescue is sort of a concept I've taken from the off-road driving things that I've learned and tried to put into my tab life and my travel life.
There's a book that came out years ago, and it's called The Gift of Fear, which sounds a lot more scary than it is. I think it was written by a law enforcement officer, if I'm not mistaken. But it's about and this is was my field of study, is that fear response in the brain. We have, in many ways, kind of dummied that down, either by thinking that we shouldn't have it. And what he talks about in the book is that if we get that instinctual feeling of fear, that's our survival mechanism kicking in. And you want to weed through racial bias and any of those kinds of things that may trigger it unnecessarily. You had that instinctual feeling. That's the gift of fear. We're wired for survival, and we have this other sense that we sometimes don't pay attention to. And I think women are more guilty of that than men. I don't know why it is that we think that somehow we're not being nice or we need to be accommodating or whatever. But if we get that feeling in any way, we need to pay attention to it. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. It's perfectly fine, but much better to be wrong and alive than to pretend like we shouldn't feel that way or talk ourselves out of it. If we have that feeling, we should pay attention to it. Another thing that I learned from law enforcement, because I worked a lot with law enforcement, is that most crimes are committed because they have the opportunity to be committed. And so people who commit these crimes, whether it's a mugging or whatever, look for opportunity. And so anything we can do, house alarms are nothing more than, people don't get shocked when they break into a house. It's a deterrent because it takes the opportunity away, because alarms are going off. So you talked about your key fob, and I use that all the time when especially if I'm hooked up. But I use it at the camp when I'm at the campground too, because it's a lot harder for someone to continue breaking in if you've got an alarm going off.
That's
I
right.
also have like a $3 air horn that's about that big from Walmart that I keep in my backpack. So if I go on a day hike, it is a loud son of a gun. And I have that, and I've used that strategy for years because I've been solo camper for so many years.
And get a dog. I mean, we joke about it, but a dog is a wonderful alarm for you.
They
Nobody gets
are,
close to my
they
trailer
are,
without
yeah.
Rocky noticing.
It's
Rocky's a
true.
little 15-pound Shih Tzu full of fight and vinegar, and he
He's
will
full
growl.
of vinegar.
He will growl at anybody, and
Yes,
it's often enough to cause people to
it
back
is.
off because it draws
It
attention.
is. I think it's also important to keep perspective too, because when you listen to lots of women, and you and I had a conversation with a bunch of women, and we got a lot of varying perspectives. Some of them, go buy a gun. And I would caution you on that, because if that's not who you are, don't buy a gun. That
That's
is
right.
not a fix for this. That we are not gun-toting women, that we need a gun in order to live our lives. We don't need to do that. So you need to know who you are. A gun, it doesn't solve any problems. And if you're not skilled with a gun, or you're going to travel from state to state and violate state transportation laws regarding transporting guns, that's kind of a default thing to go to, and you'll have people tell you that. But
Yeah.
you got to use common sense on that. It's not necessarily the fix. The fix is figuring out what you're going to do in anticipation that something might happen, and to know yourself. If you're out there being an adventurer, chances are it's already in you to be able to do what you need to do to survive.
There were a lot of tips packed into that video, and in case you missed it, this is my favorite tip right here. Rocky alerts me when anybody approaches the tab or if anything's amiss. I hope you enjoyed the content, and we'll be back for next week's episode. Thank you for watching.